What is going on, guys? I have an awesome interview in store. I got Matt Schifferle from Red Delta Project. Many of you guys have been requesting, I think for some time, to check him out once as his channel has been evolving, talking about primitive home fitness. Years ago, talking about calisthenics, suspension trainers, and then recently talking about isometrics. I got recent requests saying, hey, check out Matt and his content. Upon looking at his channel, I know I've definitely seen Matt because he has an array, a vast library of videos on his channel. Definitely don't let that get to you because we break it down really simple. And upon getting to know Matt, especially his channel and his content, I realized we had a lot in common, specifically that we'll get into in this video, getting into simplicity and intuitive training. This would be an interview I would recommend any beginner, really any age, to really recommend and check out because we get into a lot of good, valuable information, some of which, as we kind of discussed, took us years to kind of come to some of the same conclusions. Before we get into this, one thing that we definitely stress, especially people that watch my channel, and if you're using any type of home fitness or any type of modality, is really that anything works. A lot of times I hear criticism from like sliding bench training, or like it could be kettlebells, dumbbells, it could be calisthenics, that people say, well, this particular thing didn't work for me. And as Matt and I kind of gets discussed, or really how Matt succinctly summarizes it, is that really anything works. It's really up to you, the user, and what you bring to the table. So really kind of keep your ears attuned to that, not just with training, but also with diet. Well, I will put timestamps down below. I'll put links to all of Matt's content, his videos, his channel, his podcast, if you guys want to check that out. So all that kind of being said as the intro, let's jump into the video. Really excited to this interview. I think you guys are really going to like this one.
I was actually just commenting on the logo, which I'll put a logo on the screen here. What does that logo mean? Instead of a whole podcast in that logo. So what does your logo represent?
Yeah.
As we're going into it, we might as well jump into your channel and about you as we're kind of doing this.
Yep. Symbolism's always been kind of a big thing for me. I've always kind of been fascinated with how you can have almost like this secret code that's out in the open with representation of colors and shapes and stuff. And the Red Delta Project logo is actually two separate little logos that are imposed upon each other. The first of which, of course, is just the Red Delta in and of itself. And red being the colors of strength, desire, passion, which is a very key component in my approaches. And Delta is a representation of change and modification in the mathematical sense, but it's also a triangle is very much symbolic of simplicity and efficiency because it's a very simple shape. If you ever look at engineering projects where they're like, okay, we need a lot of strength and we need a lot of structure, but we also need less materials and not as costly, you're looking at triangles all over the place, aircraft frames, bridges, bicycles, that sort of thing. So that's Delta, what that all represents. And then the figure in the middle is actually a graphic representation of what I call my fundamental approach to fitness, which is what my entire way of approaching diet and exercise is based off of, which recognizes that the results that we achieve are not necessarily the outcomes of what kind of diet you follow or what kind of exercise program you do, because it's really easy to get lost in the weeds of should I do like 5x5 or 3x10 and all these other sorts of things. But instead, it recognizes that the outcomes are due to how well we can influence the three fundamental processes of fitness in a skillful way. So these processes are a cyclical process, if you think of like the old yin and yang kind of representation. So the circle in the figure is that cycle. And then the arms of the figure are like the balance, because that's what we do is we effectively influence the balance of that process through a skillful approach and having technical and proficiency. And the legs of the figure are kind of a representation of a drafting compass. If you ever see, back in mathematical days, we used to use these drafting compasses with charts and navigation and stuff. And that is a big representation of precision, skill, and being able to do things in a very skillful way. So the whole figure represents influencing the foundation of the balance of those fundamental processes through skill and proficiency. And that's what Red Delta Project is all about, in order to give you the tools to not only get the best results you can, but also help you achieve a much better sense of alignment with your approaches. So that way, fitness is not conflicting with your quality of life, which is one of the biggest obstacles that we all face when we're trying to get bigger, stronger, losing weight. It's life tends to seem to push against us. And so a lot of us end up just trying to swim upstream when it comes to following the right diet or the right program. But instead, when we recognize those fundamental processes and we apply influence in a skillful way, we take so much stress off of mind, body, and lifestyle, which not only makes it so much easier to get much better results, but it also makes the whole thing a heck of a lot more fun and enjoyable. So it's not compromising your quality of life.
So you weren't kidding. You really could do a whole podcast on that
Oh
logo.
yeah, yeah. That
so
was
it's not just
short
it's not
version.
just the guy in a little triangle. That's not my simplistic brain was saying.
Yeah,
but
there's more to it, but that's the general overview. Yep.
And I think by doing that, you kind of already kind of got into some about you and the channel. But if you want to go a little more detail, just about extrapolating on that, just you and your channel, what kind of sets you apart, and what you're all about.
Sure. So my channel is based off of, I think, all of us coaches and trainers. We all kind of come to the table with like our own pain that we want to relieve upon the world. And I grew up in a time and a place where exercise and trying to get in shape was always this uphill battle. I never had really access to gyms. If I wanted to be more conscious about healthy eating, I couldn't really be in control of my own diet very much. Of course, that was when I was younger and I wasn't really making my own food. So there was that. But it always felt like the more I wanted to push the envelope of what kind of results I got, the more life kept fighting me. Social obligations, school, work, busy schedule, just resources like access to equipment or money and time and energy. It always felt like I was always just, the more I tried, the harder it got. And then I would slide back and I would get all motivated. I'm like, all right, this time I'm going to do it. This summer, I'm going to get in shape. And I would really just kind of destroy myself with really high maintenance workout methods, really extreme dieting tactics. And the stress would build up and I'd fall off again. And it was just this yo-yo effect that just ate away at my body because I was constantly injured, constantly sick, frustrated with lack of results. Mentally, I was constantly fighting burnout. And I was, even if I was really motivated, I'd just be like, oh, I don't know if I can do this to myself again. And then just lastly, it's just stress on my life. A friend would call up and be like, dude, let's get together. Let's do X, Y, and Z. I'm like, sorry, man, I got to go to the gym for 3 hours. Wish I could. I mean, in college, I had girlfriends who literally were like, dude, it's me or the gym. What are you going to pick? And I was like, well, I guess it's going to have to be the gym then, because I thought at the time that you have to have this quote lifestyle to be in shape. And anything that didn't align with that perfect lifestyle that allowed you to have the perfect diet and the workout program and stuff, you had to sacrifice these things. I was like, fine, I guess I can't have this girlfriend or this relationship going on. I guess I can't go to this party with my friends because there's nothing there I can eat and stick to my diet and stuff. And in our fitness culture, there's a lot of this rhetoric that says, yeah, you're supposed to make these sacrifices. You're supposed to be miserable to some degree kind of thing. But over the years, I've gotten exposure to many different coaches and many different training modalities and many different dietary approaches. And eventually you get kind of that 30,000 foot view and you look at it and you're like, hold on, wait a minute. I thought I had to eat this way in order to be in shape. But these guys are doing the exact opposite and they're in better shape than I am. So what's going on here? Or the same thing, like, okay, this is the type of workout program you need to do. I'm like, that's the only way I'm going to build up my chest kind of stuff. It's like, well, this guy over here is doing nothing but push-ups and dips and he's jacked. So I started to really question, like, what the heck is actually going on here? Because whenever I came across a set of rules or requirements saying, this is how you get in shape, this is what you need to do in order to get the results you want, I would find more examples of people not doing that thing and still getting those results. And at the same time, I would find lots of people who were doing that thing who were struggling to get results. So over years of exposure to this, especially as a coach, because I worked in many different gyms. One of the gyms I worked at here in Denver, there were over 1,000 people coming to the gym every single day. So it was like a full-on exposure to just lots of different people and lots of different methods and stuff. And it was kind of a real world. Well, what is really actually working? What is really actually happening here? And the more I became aware of that and tested ideas, the more I started to become aware of it's not the diet or exercise program you're following. You could be on paleo, low carb, low fat, keto and stuff like that. It's not the diet. You could do free weights or machines or bands or calisthenics. It's not the workout program. And so because of my confusion, you start just figuring things out and learning from people who are a lot smarter than you. And eventually I came to formulate what I call, again, my fundamental approach to fitness, that it's about these 3 fundamental processes. and how you can influence those processes is what's going to give you the best results. And you just do whatever the heck you want or can in order to best do that for you. And that's what's going to produce the best result for you. And it's going to be different for everybody. And it's also going to be changing for everybody too. I mean, I've changed my training modalities 100 ways from here till Tuesday over the course of 20 some odd years as an athlete and a coach. And it's like, yeah, I can definitely do this 100 different ways. It's not like I have to do things one correct, precise way. So it gives you a lot of freedom. It gives you a lot of independence, and it gives you a lot of power to do things that are actually right by you instead of what somebody on, a podcast or a YouTube channel says, this is the best way to do this. You have to follow my rules. I'm like, no, make your own rules. Do things your own way, because it's probably going to be better for mind, body, and lifestyle. And you're going to get a hell of a lot more out of it as well.
Yeah, that was awesome. And I'm sure so many trainers that are at maybe the age we're at, hopefully, I think they're not just stuck in their ways, come to that same conclusion. And I think even the time, because I can just looking at you, might be around roughly maybe the same age a little bit. We grew up in a time where we had this advent. I always said, like, when CrossFit came around, it really was like, that was like going to be a given, because all these ideas were being shared, all these different modalities being shared, and then you had access to all this information. Where before it was like in the internet, like you had super secret information that for me, you might have got pulled into this. So it was like, well, corrective exercise was the thing. And I was obsessed with like early days of paleo. When it was no paleo, it was like Price Pottenger Association and stuff like that, Weston A. Price stuff, that you kind of saw that the trends coming. And then you were probably already going through that trend, maybe because like the vegan stuff in 2010, 2009, now that kind of comes to fruition. So you've already have some experience. Like I've been through that rabbit hole of chasing all this stuff and trying to find what works. And when you get to this intuitive approach, like you're saying, people are in that place you are, and it's hard to kind of convey that information. Like I've been where you are, and I'm trying to find that mix. And I just find, I guess the question is, do you find it's kind of a struggle when you kind of start pitching intuitive eating, we can talk about different areas, intuitive training, that people are like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but just give me a plan. I want to know a cookie cutter thing that just works for everybody,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's kind of the allure of very dogmatic approaches, is that there's something out there that's going to take care of you. And this is very prevalent with dogmatic approaches, not just fitness, but dogmatic approaches in business, politics, religion, social structures. You find this idea that you are inherently somehow going to mess everything up if left to your own vices. If you make your own decisions and you rely on yourself, you're doomed to failure. You're fundamentally flawed, in other words. So you need the system or the organization or the rules to protect you from yourself and to guide you, because you can't do this on your own, kind of thing. And that's a very dangerous place to be, because it's not giving you any sort of self-reliance. Plus, you become much more dependent upon whatever rules and type of regulations someone else thinks is best for you. And you're giving up your freedom, you're giving up your autonomy, but you're also sacrificing your ability to achieve a personal alignment with things. And that personal alignment, we've all experienced this, where we're in a job or we're working on a project or just doing something, or even if we're just cooking a meal, and it's like everything just comes together so well. It just, every piece just fits perfectly. You just can't lose. Everything seems to just flow along. That's what happens with alignment. And when we become so dependent on, okay, the only exercise you can do is like free weights or something like that, then what are the chances that's going to be a good fit for you? It's as if you walked into a shoe store and I was like, size 10 tennis shoe, that's what you need. They'd be like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, size 10 tennis shoe. The research here clearly shows that tennis shoes are the most versatile footwear you can possibly wear. And size 10 is what fits most people. So size 10 tennis shoe, that's what you need. Meanwhile, you've got like size 14 paws, and you're like, but I want something that'll be good for hiking 14ers out here in Colorado. So if you force yourself to wear shoes that are not the right size or the application for things, you're out of alignment and you get blisters and you get poor performance and things. And you're just following along because someone says this is the best way to do it. But when you have a personal alignment, that's when you recognize, okay, I don't know why, but Nike hiking boots or whatever just fit me like a glove. I don't know why. It just seems to be the best thing for me. You don't need research behind that. You don't need experts telling you that. You've done it, you've got experience. You're like, this is just the thing that works for me. I don't know why. And then you give yourself permission to say, I know you say tennis shoes, but this is actually the best footwear for me right now. And you build on that self-reliance.
You find, especially with, and we can get into maybe calisthenics, and I've discovered you more recently with isometrics. And I'll say at the start, I definitely saw your stuff coming up, and kind of went in a little cold to this, and had a lot of great strong recommendations for people that watch the channel. But I don't want to pigeonhole you incorrectly, but people might think of you as like the calisthenics guy. You talk about isometrics too, or minimalist equipment. And certainly the nature of my channel, I talk about these sliding bench things, but I make it a point of saying this is just my personal fun I've been having. That's training is working for me. It's very simplistic, and that's why I love it, because I'm all the things you're saying. I'm getting all the same results with minimal stuff. But at the same time, I'm sure you work in a gym setting. You might recommend, and I professionally talk about barbells, coach barbells. Just happens to be in my personal training, likes to be using these machines and everything else. Do you find that people might look at you and say, well, I expect Matt to give me calisthenic advice or isometrics or whatever, or do you kind of push, not saying you push those things, but do you strongly recommend them, or how do you find that kind of that area of recommending what's right for that person versus maybe getting pigeonholed in some sort of expertise?
Yeah. So with the fundamental approach, it's a very good philosophy, but people inherently want some sort of practical application advice. Like, okay, but what kind of exercise should I do, kind of thing. So eventually I started to say, okay, I've got to have some sort of methodology that I can at least write about and talk about in my podcasts and things. And bodyweight training is something I fell into about 15 some odd years ago. And I've always been fascinated with the idea of using the body weight for strength and conditioning, because it goes, again, with alignment with my priorities. Like, I want to be able to be in shape and not have to depend on much for equipment. I don't want to have to depend on a gym. I don't want to have to say, this is the one time and place I can exercise my body. I want the freedom and the independence that comes with being able to do things regardless of my circumstances. And bodyweight training inherently fits that mold, because you can be on vacation, you can have almost nothing for equipment. I can be anytime, any place, anywhere. I can still condition my body. Versus anything that's more equipment based, the second you're like, okay, I do kettlebells or barbell training, you're anchored to something, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, I'm a mountain biker, I'm a skier, I've got anchors with those activities. But when it comes to the ability to pursue fitness, for some reason, when I was really young, I really started to be aware of this idea of like, this only works if you can always do it no matter what happens in your life. Mm-hmm. And again, much of my youth in high school and college and stuff, it was always this very tenuous thing of, can I get to a gym? Do I have the time? Do I have access to the exercise and stuff? And more often than not, it was not really. You don't have the access to this stuff. So because that was not reliable, my training was not reliable. Because my training was not reliable, I couldn't reliably pursue my health and fitness. So I've always had that, almost a fear, but just the awareness of like, I need to use methods that I can always use no matter what. And bodyweight training is just kind of floated to the top of that type of hierarchy of, this is something I can do all the time, anywhere I am. And there's equipment with it, but it's very simple and basic, and it's not necessary. And again, coming from a fundamental perspective, when you understand the fundamental aspects of strength and conditioning, the method you use really isn't that important. And that's why I encourage people. Yeah, I'm a bodyweight guy. I do isometrics and stuff, but people ask me all the time, like, but I feel like I still want to incorporate deadlifts. I'm like, yeah, sure, go for it. Yeah, there's no reason not to, whatever you want. If you want to make calisthenics a big thing in your life, go for it. But if you're like, I just want to use it as a warm up and really do more of a powerlifting thing, it's like, yeah, because the only thing that really matters is how well you're influencing that fundamental process. The actual method that you're using as far as tools and the exercises, it's not really that important unless it's important to you. So for me, it is important that I have the freedom and the autonomy, and I love how bodyweight training feels. But if you don't care about that stuff, well, why in the world would you do calisthenics then? Yeah. It's really not in alignment for you. So there's no good sense in forcing yourself out of the alignment with the things that you want to do.
A question you probably get, and this is an honest question too for myself too, just asking it. Someone who's, you probably gotten somewhat of this question many times. I dabbled in calisthenics. I think right when Convict Conditioning 1, when that came out, that was the only program, that one of the few that I had a notebook to, and I was checking everything off, and I was doing got the back bends. Well, I'm like, this is awesome. I was still peppering it with whenever I would try something, I would still pepper it with gym stuff. Like I would still do, because I would always call myself a bodybuilder, but I liked that pump I would get. And I felt like calisthenics, I would still love it, but I would do it in the front end, and then I would do the bodybuilding stuff, gym stuff towards the back end. But I felt like, as liberating as it was, and learning those cool things, I felt like I needed to do those other things. And a part of me feels like, I guess the question is, I'm sure you get this, is like, well, can I get a certain maybe bodybuilder type of physique, or more hypertrophic type physique from bodybuilding? What are some ways of kind of doing that? Or are there some people you say, well, no, I'd maybe skew you towards this way? And if there's a way of doing it, what's like the proper way of kind of doing that? I've heard some calisthenic people talking about, well, just doing more reps, more volume in general, for that general tip. But just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I've always had much more of a bodybuilder-esque approach to my training as well. When I got into calisthenics, I would literally, because back in the day, we had these things called magazines, at the gym, where we had these bodybuilding magazines, and I would literally take the programs in these bodybuilding magazines, and I would match them set for set and exercise for exercise. Like, okay, that's what they're doing with the free weights. How do I do the body weight kind of equivalent of that? So I was matching the two back to back, just with a body weight style. And their programming is the same. One of the biggest mistakes people make with calisthenics is they change over from like weights to calisthenics, and they get radically different results, better or for worse. And they think, oh, calisthenics is great or worse or whatever. But it's actually because they totally changed up their programming. So they may be on like a bench press doing like 5x5. They're like, yeah, 5x5. This feels really good. It's really strong and stuff. And then they're like, okay, calisthenics. So what do I do? And someone's like, you should make it a goal to do 100 push-ups. And they're like, that sounds like a badass goal, right? And so then they spend the next several months, and they're doing like reps or sets of 70, 80, 90 repetitions. And fundamentally, you totally changed up what your body was doing. You're like, why if you did that in a gym with an empty barbell, like I'm trying to press an empty barbell 100 times, they'd be like, why? What purpose is that? I mean, I guess if you lost a bet or something, maybe, but why are you doing it that way? Add weight. Let's make it hard. Let's focus on this. But for some reason, when people change modalities, their priorities and their goals radically change, and the programming shifts. And that's why they're getting different results. But you should be able to take calisthenics first and foremost and be like, all right, I did 5x5 with weights, do 5x5 with calisthenics. Same thing, same exact stimulus. Technique's a little different, flavor's a little bit different, but fundamentally it should not be really any different. The other thing that really helps with that too is the use of suspension straps. This is something I've got a personal obsession with. You've got my straps here on the wall. I've got a collection of like 30, 40 of them probably at this point. But suspension straps essentially give you the ability to replicate almost any gym machine bodybuilding movement with your body weight. So chest flies, bicep curls, hamstring curls, leg extensions, like whatever you would do for those classic bodybuilding movements, you can do with a set of suspension straps pretty quickly and easily, and lots of different variations thereof. So when I got into calisthenics, and I was like you, following the convict conditioning a lot, but I was still like, I really want to get a good pump in that chest though. I really want to just blast my pecs. And like, great, we've got all these different chest fly variations we can do off of just these simple rings or straps. And that for me was always a good supplement to the basic calisthenics training, because it allowed me to target and not isolate, but to really focus on any muscle group that I wanted to. And that kind of made it much more of a holistic, quote, bodybuilding approach than these days. Now, calisthenics is very much about, the skills and the capabilities and things like that. And honestly, I've never really had much interest in it, just because I've always been, well, why would a bodybuilder do like a lat pull down for 1 rep and then a dip for 1 rep and then a lat pull down and then a dip for 1 rep? Because that's basically what a muscle up kind of is. Like, so I just don't care. I'd rather do sets of dips, sets of pull-ups or pull downs and have it at that. So I've always had more of a bodybuilder-esque approach to it. And because of that, my physique reflects that. Even now at 45, I still get people, I'll go to calisthenics seminars and stuff like that. And even there, people are like, so you're still like, you're doing a lot of like barbell curls and free weight work. And I'm like, no, it's still all body weight and stuff. And they're like, how do you have more of a bodybuilder physique, but you're not, like, how does that work? It's like, you train like a bodybuilder. You're just using body weight training to do it. But the training is the same thing.
I love that. And again, I love coming in cold like this because maybe you've been talking about this, and I definitely saw, I saw your physique. You got a great physique. You have size on you, you have muscle definition, and that's an eye of the beholder. If someone might have those goals. So if I say that's not offend anybody, but I think, do you ever feel like you get labeled a purist, or I should say, going back to even your personal training? Because I get the same thing. People see this there. I'm like, well, you got to be going to the gym, whatever. I'm like, it's same thing. You're just moving against resistance, basic movement patterns. Stuff's going to happen for repetition and volume. When do you do any of those? I get this question too, and I have maybe have a different answer than you, but say if someone's hearing what you're saying, like, well, I hear what you're saying, Matt, but are you saying that a body weight chest press is better than machine? If I have access to a machine, should I just be using that, or should I get some other stuff that's better? I don't even want to say you're a purist at all, but do you like body weight conditioning because of the simplicity and you can just make things work, or do you feel like it legitimately just feels better? Let's say a suspension curl, bicep curl. Do you feel like that just feels better to you, or you can make it feel better? Or do you like doing it because it is so simplistic and you can make use out of simplicity? Or would you say to somebody, if you want to do this might feel a little better, I just choose to do this machine or this apparatus?
I just do it because it feels better.
Okay.
Even in my free weight days where I was all like, the barbell is king and nothing else replaces that, I had the original Jungle Gym XT suspension straps. And that was when I started dabbling a little bit with stuff. And I would do my tricep and bicep work off that because I was like, oh, this seems to hit my biceps far more effectively than any barbell curls do. And now looking back, a lot of the ability to get what you want out of an exercise depends far more on the user than the actual thing. We get so focused on, okay, if I do this exercise or use this tool, what is the exercise or the gym or the tool bringing to me? It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. It's what are you bringing to the tool? If you give someone a pull-up bar and a set of dip bars, and they've got the right skills and motivation and discipline, focus, they're going to make amazing things happen because of what they're bringing to that pull-up bar. But you could have the best pull-up bar in the world, but you've got someone who doesn't know what they're doing. They don't have the skills. They don't have the proficiency. They don't have the discipline. You could give them the Olympic Training Center down in Colorado Springs. They're still not going to go anywhere. So it's all about what do you bring to it? And then ultimately just paying attention to your body. And a lot of it's, I always tell people a gym is like a buffet. Like, I got a million ways to work your biceps here. So if you end up doing something, you're like, I love the way this feels in my biceps, let me know, because it's all chicken at the end of the day.
Right.
Got 20 different kinds of chicken on the buffet. They all do the same thing. But when you notice that you have just a gravitation towards a preference of something for some reason, you don't even need to know why. It's like, I don't know why. That just feels really good. Great, go for it. For whatever that is. And that was what happened with me, especially with bodyweight training, is I did a month of straight bodyweight training because I had a couple of injuries I needed to heal up. And then after that month, I was like, all right, I'm going to go back to using a lot more of the barbells and the free weights and stuff like that. And after a few weeks, I started to notice it's like, this is good, but really rather be doing the handstands, if I'm honest with you. And I'd really rather be doing this type of leg training than on the leg press. I don't quite feel it like I do in my quads when I do this. And just because of that, I was like, well, I guess the bodyweight training is just helping me achieve better alignment. It feels better. I just like the way it works for me and everything. So that's what I've done.
That's awesome. That's such an awesome response. And I think you get people that might see you, or it could be any machine or device. And I've heard this, and not just to myself, but just going throughout the years training people, like, well, I tried this, it didn't work. I tried that, it didn't work. And I'm like, odds are if you tried a bunch of these things that didn't work, the next thing you're going to try is probably not going to work either. So it's like, well, I think this is better. Well, if you didn't get the results going to because I hear that a lot, even when people go to the home gym, like the home gym just isn't working for me. And I'll ask them, like, well, how is the real gym working for you? And me and you probably know many people who go to the gym all the time for many years. And there's a right and wrong way. There's genetics, of course. There, maybe you can say his diet and stuff is involved with that, but not a whole lot's happening. So there's something that maybe has to be changed. So they're doing something inefficiently, ineffectively, that there's not something they're missing. It's just something, the application is just kind of off.
Yeah. exactly. And for the most part, it's something that you have to learn and you have to adapt and you have to have some patience in order to figure out a way to make it work for you. Sometimes you do find something where you're just like, that's it. I love it. It's great. You know, you go to one yoga class or one power or kettlebell class or whatever. And in 20 minutes, you're like, I'm in love. This is my thing. This is my jam. I'm getting a kettlebell tattoo kind of thing.
Right.
That sort of thing does happen. And you want to follow that for sure. But it's usually pretty rare. It doesn't happen very often. So it usually what it requires is, again, that level of proficiency, because proficiency is the magic sauce. When you are more skilled and proficient at doing something, it feels a lot better. It's a lot more rewarding, and it's usually going to be better for you. I had a guy one time who hated pull-ups. He's like, I just can't seem to do this sort of thing. It's just not what I want to do. So I gave him a short little pull-up lesson, a little bit more technical stuff, packing the shoulders and things like that. And I was like, I want you to do nothing but pull-ups for your back workout for the next 2 weeks. And just see what happens. And after that 2 weeks, he's like, I love pull-ups. They're the best thing ever, kind of thing. And it's like, well, yeah, because he improved his proficiency. He got comfortable with it as well. That's another big thing in our fitness culture is the word comfort is often demonized. But the fact of the matter is comfort is one of the most powerful, useful things that we have, because you will never achieve a good degree of success in anything until you get really comfortable with doing something. So sometimes you just need to practice the hell out of that thing and make yourself just feel more comfortable with it. And that just, you roll up his sleeves and you just got to do it a lot. Like the guy was like, just pull-ups, 2 weeks, just do that. And he got much more comfortable with it. And then he became more proficient with it as well. And that's why he loves it. But when we're like, I don't like this exercise or this technique. Well, how often are you doing it? You know, I dabble with it here and there and a little bit. And when I'm feeling up to it, it's like, no, you got to really just, it's like any other skill or something. If you're learning a language or something, you've got to just really commit to it for a short period of time to get used to it, to get really comfortable with it. And then you're off to the races.
I loved how you gave that recommendation too, because it's a nice simplistic recommendation. Just what did you say? Do how many pull-ups? Just do pull-ups for back?
Yeah, I didn't even give him a program. I was just like, back pull-ups are the only back and bicep exercise you can do. That's it. You can't
I think those are the best tips. I mean, I think nowadays, again, so hard. I think it was hard as it always has been. But now if you go nowadays, Google searching something and the client's just like, I can't handle that because I heard this is a certain way of doing it. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like, I'm just talking about simplicity, I guess. I mean, simplicity in everything from training to, and again, even though there's simplicity, there's always a background concept behind that for sure. You know, we can say, well, intuitive eating means whatever I want. You probably have some sort of framework to your diet of how people are working your structure a little bit. But how do you kind of coach people? What are some recommendations you have for people about just sifting through the weeds of diets, exercise, specificity, all this stuff to getting into a nice comfortable spot of finding, you know, what are some simplistic stuff that kind of works?
Yeah. So it's really easy to get lost in details. And especially nowadays when we have social media and the internet and stuff, content creators like us, we're kind of under the gun of, you got to put out content. You've got to stay relevant. You've got to put out things that are useful. And by and large, most of the stuff we put out are the small details, superficial things that can be helpful, but they're really not that important. You could probably scroll through Instagram fitness advice all day long and really not find anything all that relevant or important to you other than, oh, if I grab the pull-up bar this way, it may be a little more comfortable on my hands or something. So it boils down to fundamental movements and principles that we always just get back to that. And then you can use whatever details you like in order to make that happen. So when it comes to strength training, I split the body up into what I call my tension chains. It's not about working muscles. It's not about working movements. It's about your chains. And a chain is how you can structure and utilize tension throughout the body, apply force through the body in a movement while working muscles. So it's kind of a functional bodybuilding kind of aspect to it. And there are 6 chains. There's 3, what I call movement chains, and 3 support chains. The 3 support chains are the classic anatomical chains that we usually run across in like Gray's Anatomy books and stuff. We've got our anatomic or interior chain, or I call it the flexion chain. or flexing ourselves forward. Usually that's called ab work. We've got our extension chain or the posterior chain. That's anything that's extending the body upwards. And then we have the lateral chain, which is anything side supported or twisting sort of things. And those are what I call the support chains. And then the movement chains are push, pull, and squat. So anything where you're pushing, pulling, and then squatting is basically any exercise or activity where your hip and your heel are getting closer and further apart from each other. So basing that on strength training movements, when you look at your strength training of any type of modality, everything boils down to flexion, extension, lateral, push, pull, and squat. So whenever I'm programming folks' workouts, I'm like, okay, today's a movement chain day or a support chain day, or today we're going to work on the squat and extension chain day kind of thing. Whenever we do that, that gives you full license to do whatever the hell you want for that. So to give you an example, like extension chain, we've got deadlifts, we got power cleans, we've got kettlebell, most kettlebell work, snatches, swings, single arm swings, cleans, bridges, GHD, hip extension, some types of crawling like the crab walk, pulling a weight sled backwards. This is all extension work. It's all extension. So it's all doing fundamentally, basically the same thing. And you can get kind of in the details a little bit, like, okay, I really care about how much I deadlift. I'm like, well, then we're going to focus on the deadlift. But for the most part, as long as you're just getting that movement pattern and sending force through that tension chain, you're covering your bases. So that's why I always, when it comes to strength training, I say, focus on just your tension chains and then just do whatever you can, want, or have access to in order to make that happen. That's best for you. And you'll cover your bases. You don't need to think of every little tiny detail when you're doing these sorts of things. Same thing with diet. We way overcomplicate the diet. Most of the dietary and nutrition advice out there is just totally unnecessary. Like we could have stopped learning about diet and nutrition 30 years ago and still been fine to a large degree. Most of the stuff out there is just a lot of noise and distraction and stuff. And it's not bad or ill-intended. But when someone on Instagram is telling me I shouldn't eat spinach, I know we're definitely lost in the weeds at that point. So my approach is very, very simple. And in fact, it's so simple, it takes about 30 seconds to learn it. And I've even had some people tell me that, well, once I learned that, diet was taken care of for me. I don't need to learn anything else for the most part. And that is my 3P strategy. Because basically, you don't need to worry about your diet. You just need to worry about think about what you're eating from one meal to the next. Because if you take care of your meals, your diet will take care of itself. And the 3P strategy is whenever you're sitting down to a meal, you just think of and make sure you're covering your 3 Ps. And so P number 1, protein. Do you have a good protein source there? Should be fairly obvious. P number 2, plant. Again, good plant-based source. I don't care what it is, herbs, fruits, vegetables, tea in the morning, whatever, just something that comes from a plant. Okay. And then the third P is just portion size. Eating enough, but keep it well within the realm of kind of weight management goals. I want to gain weight. Well, portions are bigger than normal then. I want to lose weight. Portions are smaller then. I just want to kind of stay the course. Well, you eat enough to satisfy your hunger and your appetites and stuff, but don't, eat until you're full. And again, it's a skill thing. I know a lot of times when I give this type of advice, people are like, well, exactly how do I do that? You have to figure this stuff out because this is about building skills. It's about building proficiency with what kind of exercises do you select in the gym? What kind of foods do you feel are best as a protein source for you? You could be like, every time I eat beef, I don't know, it just doesn't quite do it for me digestion-wise and stuff. Okay, these are things you have to learn for yourself. You could spend all day on the internet going, is beef good for me kind of thing. And you're going to get a million different opinions. You're going to get a lot of people saying, it's the worst thing for you. Oh, it's a superfood and all this stuff. None of that matters, okay? It's not going to give you the answer you need. You eat a cheeseburger, how do you feel? That's what matters. That's how you want to be paying attention to things. So it takes time, it takes practice, it takes trial and error. But when we have these guiding principles of, okay, I got my 3 Ps, I got my protein, I got my plant, and I probably need an extra egg roll with this lo mein because that's not going to satisfy me enough. Okay, these are things you just learn on your own. But you're getting the skills and proficiency that empower you to make by far the best choices for you personally. And whenever we're ignoring those abilities and we're just going off of, well, this guy on the internet said I should not eat this, but I got to eat that, you're just giving up that power. You're turning it into basically a giant guessing game. You might as well just take diet advice from a magic 8-ball, because it's a guesswork to a large degree at that point. You can use this advice for a starting point. You can use it as an idea, like, okay, I don't know what to do, paleo idea. Okay, great, I'll start there. But after several months, you're like, I just really feel like I need a little more starch in my diet, more carbohydrate. It's like, add some rice, might be a good idea. And that's when, again, I get the emails from folks saying, I'm doing this plan, but I feel like I might be better if I make this change to it. At which point I always tell them, then make the change. Because if you've got that little inkling in the back of your mind saying, I think I might be better off making this change, you probably are. Because your body and your subconscious and everything is telling you, this is good, but it could be better. But when we get dogmatic and we're like, no, I can't eat rice, it's not paleo and stuff, we've lost we're off the rails at that point. We're no longer doing it for health and fitness. We're doing it for the sake of just sticking to a plan.
You find it's hard for people though when I see it, I'm sure you see it, is the constant jumping back and forth, again, because of the culture we're in with social media. There's one fad to the next fad, and what sounds like an extreme fad 5 years ago is very normal now. I mean, I think that I had someone tell me, and this is actually no offense to anybody, if they like eating the carnivore diet and something that works for them, more power to them. But I had someone tell me, well, I said we're going for like diet stuff, but I just eat a normal basic diet. And it was about 30 minutes into the conversation, it turned into, and I realized, okay, no, she just eats nothing but meat, which was, again, that's fine. That works for you. But we've gone a long ways to what is quote unquote, I'm not gonna say normal, but what works for certain people. I'm just finding a very much of a trend of, well, I'll try your approach, I'll try someone else's approach, and they're just checking boxes, but not staying consistent. And I can see definitely with the type of training that you're recommending or promoting, I should say, I don't know how you want to describe it, but just calisthenics and just using body weight, that takes some consistency, definitely some level of discipline, as all exercise does. But it takes, I would think, a little bit of time to just, especially someone who's older, to maybe, I don't want to say see results, but just like everything, you got to stick with it. So do you find people saying, well, I'm going to try this calisthenic thing out for a little bit, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to jump back to something else? Like, how do you, the question is, how do you manage someone like that is constantly jumping back and forth or competing with ideologies and concepts all the time?
Yeah, because we're always exposed to the excitement of somebody who is just getting into something. We always hear about folks on the honeymoon period when they're on a new diet or a new workout program, or they're just getting into the new workout idea, like let's say CrossFit kind of thing, right? Everybody was terribly excited about CrossFit. It was during the first 2 to 3 months of when they joined a box. You never heard about 8 months later where they're like, yeah, I'm pretty burned out. This isn't really for me. I'm going to take up jogging now. You never hear, it's the same thing on social media. Nobody's posting their failures. You're only seeing the good side of people's lifestyle and things. So we're constantly exposed to, this is the greatest thing ever. This is the best thing. It's like, all right, well, give it 4 more months and then tell me how you feel about it. Because we're constantly getting pulled around with this honeymoon period where everybody's excited about the new toy that they're playing with. But the fact of the matter is, whenever you look at the long-term track record of those who are successful, like the National Weight Loss Registry, it's like the biggest database of people in the world who have lost and kept weight off consistently, or someone in the gym who has built an amazing physique or is really strong, inevitably you're going to find someone who almost never has the trends going on. They're not following any particular diets. I got a bit of flack the other day. I posted a video where a gentleman on my podcast asked a question, and he was like, I can never seem to stick to a diet for more than a couple of weeks. What am I doing wrong? I'm like, I think it's the dieting. Stop dieting. Don't do it at all. And then I started going into, I was like, I got to be honest with you. Most people who are lean or have lost weight, they know they never diet. They might have gotten started on paleo or keto or something for a few months. But if you talk to somebody who's lost a good amount of weight and has kept it off for 5 years, they're not following a diet, any particular diet. They've just kind of figured out what helps them achieve alignment, which is not going to fit into some sort of dogmatic box. Their workout program is going to be the same thing. It's going to be very simple, basic techniques. It's probably going to be a combination of things that they just kind of collected over the years that they just know works for them. But when we get excited about something, or people are like, you got to do this sort of thing, it's stock diet and exercise advice. And almost nobody achieves the success and results they want long-term with the stock option. It almost never happens. Like convict conditioning book, people were crazy about that. I don't know anybody who took convict conditioning 1, followed it to the letter, and got what they want out of it. And that's not on convict conditioning. That's like any program at all.
Right.
It's just never really happened. Instead, it's always, this was a good base for me, and I added in suspension training, and I added in some weighted dips and pull-ups just because I like the heavy stuff. It's always this customizable thing that gets the best results, because we often forget this whole fitness thing is completely open source. There's no reason you need to color within the lines on any program or diet exercise. It's a completely made up thing. It's like a border between a state. Don't cross that border. What? Why not? There's no reason not to. So use these stock options of the stock diet and the stock work. Use it as like a place to start. But is it going to get you where you want to go? No, probably not. And even if it is the greatest thing since sliced bread, even if it is, oh, dude, I did this paleo thing and convict conditioning, and it was the best thing in the world. Oh my God, I've never been in better shape. Inevitably, I'm like, well, then why aren't you still doing it?
Right.
It was so great. Then why'd you stop? But inevitably, it's like, oh, this is the best thing ever. It's like, okay, talk to me in about 6 months or so. And then you'll see him at the party. You're like, so how's it going? It's like, good, but I'm also incorporating kettlebells, and I added in some rice and some other things. And, this whole wheat pasta is really good that I got off the, kind of thing. So they always color outside the lines when they find success. It's never about staying within the dogmatic box. That never really pans out well for most people.
Yeah, I think it's really easy. And I mean, I got, because it seems like I have grant, I'll take the blame, like a niche type of channel, but I always tell people, try different things, supplement different things. Even the isometrics, like that was something I never really explored too much. Only recently, because talking to someone else, I started looking at stuff, and I saw a lot of your videos on that. And same thing, I got the book and I was back to being as a kid again. I'm looking like, oh, this looks awesome. Then I had the same thoughts, like, well, what's the best way to program this? How should I be doing this? But then I'm like, you know what? Let's just have fun with it. And I'm mixing it in with my normal training. And I'm sure I'll just like it with everything else, had a good time with it. And so the question I kind of had with you is just, I don't want to keep you too long, I know we got to stop soon, is just kind of overthinking. I think that's something in general. People overthink everything to a point that I think it's almost detrimental. I don't know if you were familiar with the guy who coined the phrase orthorexia, the obsession with healthy eating. This guy, Stephen Bratman, his whole story. He was
great.
Yeah, and just summary for people who haven't read it. I mean, he was a nutritionist, MD, and I think everything is all natural, totally like a exercise nutrition freak who is diagnosed everything had to be a nutritional cause or an exercise holistic thing. And I heard the story of the beer and pizza diet from his book. It was, yeah, this girl had all these issues, bloating, physiological and psychological issues. And she came back and saw him. She's like, well, what did you do differently? Everything's well. It was like, I just ignored everything you said and just started drinking beer and eating pizza. And he's like, well, and even he's like, well, there has to be something in the beer or the pizza. There has to be, and it's like, no, it's just, I had to relax. And I think the idea of stress, and I think that does play a role, I think, with hormones and this yo-yo dieting and just over-exercising, killing herself, dieting, the over-exercising, that I think is really bad. And I think me and you, or people that just talk about this stuff, or any trainer or coach, really has to do a service to people to not push that kind of ideology on people. And it's very easy to take advantage of someone. And one last point on that is, I think I heard a statistic that the people that actually seek out trainers the most have the highest incidence of that type of unhealthy disordered eating phobia. So we're more likely to kind of see that type of person. And I don't know if that person's out there listening. I think we're all victim to it. I was certainly a victim to it. Just be very mindful of that. So I guess what's some tips on just kind of overthinking? Or just
again, it boils down to the empowerment of a fundamental approach to fitness. So when we recognize it's about those processes, which I know we haven't gotten into, but you can find a lot more information on Red Delta Project and stuff. But recognizing that nothing you ever do really does all that much, seriously, because the processes of fitness that are being governed by things, when you diet, when you exercise and stuff, you can't control that process. It's largely up to Mother Nature and due to circumstances outside your control. But you can influence it. You can direct it. And when we change our diet and our workout and everything like that, what we're doing is we're influencing that process. And recognizing that, okay, I have some power, not much, but some, recognizing then that influences are various sizes and they have different amounts of like gravitational pull on that process. So a lot of times when we get lost in the weeds and we're really agonizing over details, we're putting a lot of effort and a lot of attention to things that honestly really don't matter very much. You know, when someone comes up to me and they're talking about the sugar content in strawberries versus raspberries, and they want an answer like, okay, what do I do? It's like, seriously, you're worrying about something that's such a small, little, tiny influence, because arguably everything can be an influence and everything matters, but does it really matter that much? No. And by and large, most of the advice out there, most of the rules we follow, most of the things we're told are so important to get right in order to eat right and exercise, honestly, really doesn't matter that much. It's really not that important. And again, this is not helped by a lot of social media and influencers like ourselves, because it's like, it's so crucial that you do the correct number of sets. You know, don't do 3, 4 is the correct number. Oh, heaven forbid if you ever do 5. Oh God, then you're overtrained. Everything is the worst case scenario, right? But when you understand the fundamental processes and you understand what an influence is and how much you're influenced, you recognize that most of your choices and decisions really don't really do that much. They're really not that powerful. So you can take a lot of the stress off your plate, because it's like, would it matter if I had croutons on my salad tonight? No, not really. Of course, you talk to someone who's diehard paleo and they're like, that's not paleo. Oh, that'd be terrible for you. How do you undo the damage? It's just a freaking crouton. You're not doing anything really that bad, and it's even bigger than you think. Because it's like, I didn't get my workout in today. It was pouring rain. I didn't go for my run. What do I do? Nothing. Relax. Go watch Netflix. Eat some ice cream. Like it's a drop in the bucket. Everything we do is a drop in the bucket. There is nothing I can give you that's going to make a big difference if you do it once in a while. There's not a workout I can give you. There's not a meal I can give you or a diet. The only way anything in this fitness world works is consistent repeatability for long periods of time. It's like building a wall. You can have little bricks that you're stacking. You're like, well, this is easy. Or you can take the biggest, hardest rock that you can possibly carry and you get it out of the quarry and you break your back putting it on the wall. And oh my gosh, that was so much work. Did it really matter in the construction of the wall? Not really. That huge rock that took all that effort was still a pebble in the Great Wall of China. It's nothing. So everything that we're looking at, we build it up in our minds and emotionally, like it's a big deal. No, it's not. I guarantee you it's not. If you have a couple beers on a Friday night, is that going to matter? No, it's not going to be a big deal. If you drink a 6-pack every single night for the next 5 years, that's going to have a bigger influence just because of time, because you made it a big influence. But a couple of beers with some friends Friday night, is that a big influence? No. Should you worry about it? No, it's not something you really need to worry about. And a lot of times that stress and anxiety when it comes to diet and exercise is sweating the small stuff. We're sweating the things that really aren't a big deal. And the really downside of that is you're sweating the small stuff, but you're ignoring the big stuff that is a big deal. And it's like, oh, sugar and raspberries versus strawberries. I'm like, didn't you get 4 hours of sleep last night? That's a much bigger deal than what you're concerned with here. It's like you haven't been able to get a good night's sleep in 3 weeks. Let's start there.
I see it a lot with training. I think with training, a lot of people like, I got this super specific sets and rest scheme. And my biggest thing is like, you either did too much or too little. Like, I think honestly, sometimes I did too little a lot of times. Like that was good. I did what I had to do when I leave. I never want to condone overworking out and overtraining, but I find that seems to be the biggest thing is not putting in a lot of effort because they're holding themselves short. And I just said the intuitive approach. If you could do more that day, do a little more. If you could, and actually, I just saw that just now. I saw you posted something on your video today as an intuitive training, and you had some quote from your grandpa or something. And I was like, I was like dead on. You want to repeat that? We can actually kind of wrap it up here in a second. But yeah, you just want to share that.
Yeah. So intuitive eating, intuitive training stuff. My grandfather always told me, I didn't appreciate it when I was younger, but he always said, you got to work with what you got. You play the cards that life dealt you kind of thing. And intuitive eating and training is merely that. What time do you have? What energy do you have? What motivation do you have? What equipment do you have? Okay, great. You got a lot of these things. Go ham, go for it, rock and roll. But it's like, I got 20 minutes before my next client. All I've got is a pull-up bar and a medicine ball, and I'm dead tired. Okay, great. Some light stretching, some light work. We'll get some hanging leg raises, call it a day. Great. You're working within your circumstances. You're always striving for that personal alignment. And if you are forcing yourself to stick to the program kind of thing, then you're pulling yourself out of alignment. And it's just not going to end in your favor. It's not going to be, a favorable sort of thing. So work with what you've got. If you have more, do more. Great, go for it. But inevitably, life changes and you're just not going to have as much at some point. So don't force yourself to overdo. Just simply cut back a little bit, because there's no such thing as an ineffective workout or ineffective exercise or set or rep. It's all a stimulus. It's all an influence. It is doing something, I guarantee you. It's not like you have to do a certain amount of work for it to magically count and be effective. It's not how exercise works. You just have to tell your body what you want it to do on any scale, and it will work.
I was totally awesome. Great practical advice at the end. I always want to get some sort of practical stuff at the end, and you covered that. Definitely blew it out of the park. So that was awesome. Great talking to you. I know you got to do a hard stop here. You were very generous with your time. We went for a decent amount of time here, so I really appreciate that. Where can people kind of find you? I'll put everything down in the description box. We also have a lot of books on Amazon, a lot of good products, services, programs. So I want to plug all those. So I just want to do any kind of final plugs, final thoughts, or anything.
Red Delta Project, anything will find me. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Red Delta Project will pop me up, reddeltaproject.com. And if you're on Amazon, I've got a plethora of books that I've written and stuff. My name, Matt Schifferle, or Red Delta Project, will find stuff. Again, so the links will be down below and everything. But it's not hard to find me if you just simply search Red Delta Project. All the stuff will just start to come right on up. I even find myself accidentally. Sometimes I'll do a Google image search for isometrics, and like the first 3 images are like my thumbnails on YouTube or something. I'm like, oh, I found myself kind of thing. So awesome. It's not hard to find me.
Awesome. Yeah, we didn't even get into that, but I'm sure people can definitely get more information about that. So very cool. Thanks for talking, Matt. I really appreciate it. And I'll say goodbye to you off the air here.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Matt.